Let's get to Tim Walz, who, just when you think no one's sitting at this table, neither she nor the big white blanket, can embarrass themselves any further, he does. She asks him, to her credit, about the carrying the weapons in war, which we know is a lie. He never served in war. He's been stealing valor for quite some time.
Tim Walz has coasted for years on a carefully crafted reputation of being Minnesota nice, a approachable, folksy governor with a warm smile, firm handshake, and down-to-earth persona. But when Megyn Kelly turns her sharp attention toward him, that easygoing facade collapses instantly. She rips apart the polished image, exposing a politician whose charm can't hide his contradictions, missteps, and opportunistic choices. Kelly doesn't just poke holes in Walz's act. She incinerates it entirely, leaving his legacy wobbling like a house of cards in a windstorm.
Walz is also out on the new media tour and trying to help her when he's not defending his comments on the Electoral College. And he sits down with Michael Strahan, who's the best thing ABC has going. And Strahan actually asks him about his many, many lies. There's a much longer list than actually came up, but he did raise it to his credit. Here's how that went.
For years, Tim Walz has tried to sell himself as the everyman governor, a corn-fed Midwestern dad who just happens to run a state. He leans heavily on his Minnesota nice persona, the kind of guy you'd expect to see at church potlucks, swapping stories about high school football while passing around a casserole. But when Megyn Kelly sets her sights on him, that entire act collapses faster than a cheap lawn chair in a storm. Behind the soft tone and practiced smile lies a politician who's played every side of the fence, and Kelly makes sure there's no fence left standing by the end of her takedown.
You said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in schools.
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon, because it's about to get brutal. Kelly doesn't just laugh at Walz's contradictions. She spotlights them with the intensity of a searchlight on a backyard raccoon. Walz has built his brand as the steady hand of the Midwest, but Kelly exposes the reality. A man juggling conflicting policies, promising one thing to one crowd while whispering the opposite to another. She's not buying the Minnesota nice routine for a second. To her, Walz isn't a leader. He's the human embodiment of beige wallpaper. Bland, unoriginal, and forgettable. Until you realize just how badly he clashes with everything around him.
Some statements that just aren't true. And the comment about weapons of war that I carried in war, which you didn't. You said that you were in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre when you weren't. You kind of chalked it all up to bad grammar or getting the dates wrong. Yeah. But your opponents say you lied to make yourself look better. Do they have a point?
Well, look, 35 years ago, got the opportunity to be in Hong Kong, be in China, learned a lot about it, served 24 years in the National Guard, passionately, in an instance, talking about gun violence in schools.
The real problem with Walz's leadership, Kelly argues, is that it thrives on pretending problems don't exist until they hit him square in the face. Rising crime rates. He tosses out empty platitudes about community values. Struggling schools? He shows up for photo ops in classrooms, nodding along like a savior while offering nothing of substance. And then he disappears, leaving results as elusive as a Minnesota summer lasting more than 2 weeks. Kelly dismantles this carefully staged act, showing that Walz hasn't been solving problems. He's been posing near them.
Fallout continues for Tim Walz on the disastrous performance he delivered, in particular when it comes to his self-described knuckle-headed behavior, which was just his latest in a series of lies. The reason he resorted to, I'm a knucklehead, was he got confronted with his latest lie.
But it's not just the lack of substance Kelly skewers. It's the glaring contradictions. Walz loves to brand himself as a champion of small-town values. Yet his policies read like they were drafted straight from big city bureaucrats' wish lists. He'll preach freedom and personal responsibility, only to cheer for government overreach when it benefits his political allies. Kelly lays out the pattern clearly. Walz isn't a decisive leader. He's a political chameleon, constantly changing colors, depending on who's watching and what narrative fits the moment.
I think people know me. They know who I am. They know where my heart is. And again, my record has been out there for over 40 years to speak for itself.
And the idea that you said that you were in war, did you misspeak as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar's not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog.
This took chutzpah. Let's go through it. You said you carried weapons in war, but you've never deployed in a war zone. A campaign official of yours said you misspoke. Did you? Well, I'm proud, incredibly proud of my record.
The roasting really heats up when Kelly dives into Walz's crisis management, especially during the pandemic, which became the ultimate test of his leadership. At first, he positioned himself as the calm, steady guardian of public safety, handing down mandates like candy on Halloween. But behind the scenes, Kelly reveals chaos, mixed messages, shifting rules, and explanations that sounded more like excuses than leadership. Calm doesn't equal competence, she argues. Off camera, his administration was as organized as a garage sale in the rain, leaving Minnesotans confused, frustrated, and desperate for clarity. Instead, all they got was chaos, delivered with a friendly accent.
That's been unearthed. There's a long list of them. This one was that he was in China when the Tiananmen Square disaster unfolded, when hundreds of people were killed. You know whether you were in a place where hundreds of people are being massacred by their government when it happens. But he continues to try to say, like, oh, gee, I was just kind of confused. You know, that happened in May and I was there in August, but I guess I just imagined that I was there, whatever. So he got asked about that debate moment where he completely melted down.
When it comes to policing and public safety, Walz's contradictions pile even higher. On camera, he talks tough and claims to back law enforcement. But behind closed doors, he folds like a paper plate at a barbecue whenever progressive activists shout loud enough. Kelly highlights how his leadership during periods of social unrest wasn't leadership at all. It was political duck and cover. Walz let chaos brew, hoping passivity would somehow count as empathy. But understanding doesn't stop riots, and sympathy doesn't restore order. Kelly's roast sharpens further when she compares his governing style to a Minnesota winter. Long, drawn out, and filled with promises that spring is right around the corner. But spring never comes when Minnesotans need it most.
Well, they're comparing this moment by Tim Walz to that because he looked so inept and like a faker, like he didn't belong there and he was trying to convince us of something that wasn't real as he decided to go pheasant hunting. And Charlie, you're a gun guy. You tell me whether this looked authentic to you. Here he is.
That's my theory.
And it never fits quite right.
Never fits quite right. Just not quite right. How do you give it back?
Governor, what kind of gun is it?
This is a Beretta A400.
Kelly also tears apart the illusion that Walz is still one of us. In truth, he's been living inside the political bubble for so long that the only small town he remembers is the one his campaign consultants write about in speeches. And then there's his economic record, which Kelly absolutely carves up. Walz tries to spin his fiscal policies as steady stewardship, but Minnesota under his leadership has become an experiment in how fast taxpayers can lose patience. High taxes? Check. Bloated budgets? Double check. And somehow, despite all that spending, essential services still lag behind. Kelly mocks his national ambitions, comparing it to a guy who struggles to run a lemonade stand, suddenly deciding he's ready to take over Starbucks. Ambition without competence, she argues, isn't leadership. It's delusion.
Doing this. Equally proud of my service in the classroom. Did I mention I was a teacher and a coach, an assistant coach? Okay, whatever. But he's more stolen valor. In the classroom, I'm in the classroom. My record speaks for itself. It doesn't actually. You've put a lot of lies into that record that you've been called out on by service personnel. You must clarify, as your campaign had tried to do. And now you appear to be distancing yourself from that clarification. And then here's, two pieces of this that are really, I speak like they do. People are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves. And I speak especially passionately about, and then he goes on to blame it on the school shootings. I guess he was upset about school shootings, so he lied. But stop saying you speak.
Kelly dismantles yet another myth, the idea that Walz is a unifier. His defenders claim he brings people together, but Kelly flips that narrative on its head. The only unity he inspires is bipartisan frustration. Democrats see him as too cautious, Republicans see him as reckless, and independents see him as indecisive. The so-called unifier has achieved only one thing: uniting Minnesotans in disappointment. And in today's climate, mediocrity isn't harmless, it's dangerous. Leaders who coast on charm while dodging hard decisions leave everyone else to deal with the fallout.
Political environment.
And Vice President Harris said that she told you to be a little bit more careful on how you say things.
Well, I did it, even the other day of just speaking passionately about these gun violence situations and meeting with these survivors. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and I do think in these positions, whether it be governor or being Vice President of the United States, you do need to be careful. You do need to be a little more thoughtful on it.
Okay, guys, I will submit to you that the American people are not dumb. And I would submit to you that the American people will look over "I'm friends with school shooters," which he said in that vice presidential debate, as him misspeaking. Everyone will give him that grace. But it's not going to work on this litany of other lies, because you don't misspeak over and over.
Walz's entire strategy, Kelly argues, has been surviving criticism by looking pleasant while failing upward. Behind every friendly grin and soft-spoken answer lies a career defined not by vision, but by avoidance. He counts on the public forgetting, moving on, or simply not caring enough to scrutinize the details. For all his speeches about accountability and transparency, Walz's administration has earned a reputation for dodging scrutiny, burying tough answers in bureaucracy, and drowning criticism in talking points. Kelly calls it what it is: a political shell game designed to disguise incompetence as strategy.
On Wednesday in Pennsylvania, and here's how he handled it.
I have my dates wrong. I was in Hong Kong and China in 1989. That move from Hong Kong into China, it was profound for me. That was the summer of democracy. I said it's where I understood how sacred democracy was. It's what encouraged me, about 15 back and forth with my students, taking them to China. I speak like everybody else speaks. I need to be clear, I will tell you that, but here's my whole point on that thing with China. I do understand China a hell of a lot better than Donald Trump. Kamala Harris understands.
Kelly also targets Walz's failures on education, an area where he brands himself as the champion of Minnesota's future. But test scores tell a different story. Reading and math proficiency have plummeted. Classrooms are struggling, and exhausted teachers feel abandoned. Walz solutions? Pouring more money into a broken system without demanding accountability or results. Kelly exposes the hypocrisy of promising opportunity while delivering stagnation, arguing that equity without outcomes is just expensive window dressing. And when it comes to the economy, his so-called strong suit, Minnesotans feel overtaxed and undersupported, treading water while Walz brags about imaginary progress.
On an instance there, proud of the service that I've done, proud to be a teacher in that classroom, proud to have been very public all these years and owning it when I, said, look, I was there in August of '89. And I think the policies, whether it be dealing with China and understanding China's human rights record, what you can be certain there is that Kamala Harris and I aren't going to, pick dictators on speed dial.
Well, but it's one of the things with trust. So there are going to be some people who say, we can't trust him to even tell the truth about himself.
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
Well, I said they know who I am. I know who I am. I know the work that I've done. I know that things get spun in a political.
Kelly lands her most devastating blows when exposing Walz's habit of following rather than leading. He's mastered the art of waiting to see which way the political wind blows, then sprinting to the front to call it courage. During the George Floyd protests, Walz floundered, caught between activists demanding sweeping change and citizens begging for safety. Instead of decisive leadership, he delivered chaos, leaving both sides frustrated. Schools stayed closed longer than necessary. Businesses suffocated under prolonged restrictions, and mental health crises skyrocketed. Kelly frames it perfectly. Walz didn't govern with vision. He governed with fear, leaving Minnesota families to pick up the pieces.